Let's get started. We have a great webinar planned for you. Welcome to Art for Social Change. Welcome to Art for Social Change, Cultivating Youth Voice in the Anti-Violence Movement. Presented by Indiana Disability Justice, a program of Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I am the webinar coordinator, Jennifer Milhar-Sick. Next slide. This slide has 7 icons: a recording button, mic, closed captioning icon, tech support, questions, ASL, and English to Spanish translation. We are recording, and the webinar will be posted on our hub shortly. Please remember to mute your mic. Closed captioning is available under the closed captioning icon in your Zoom window. You can put tech support and questions in the chat directed to Sierra Olivia. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we will not be offering English to Spanish translation and ASL. Next slide. On to our disclaimer, which says we are funded through the CDC, the Department of Health, and the Noise Foundation. The views expressed here may not reflect those of our funders, and any mention of commercial practices and trade names do not imply governmental endorsement. Next slide. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's explore IDJ. This slide has the IDJ logo, which is purple and orange. It says Indiana Disability Justice with orange waves. IDJ is a project and primary prevention strategy at Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We aim to support statewide efforts to prevent violence and enhance independence and wellness among people with disabilities. Our efforts are centered on the voices and actions of people with disabilities, and we operate on a mix of practices including social justice, public health, and popular education. Next slide. Here is our agenda for today. First, we will familiarize ourselves with common language around what youth-centered primary prevention can look like. Next, we will explore art and advocacy as transformative evaluation practices. We will then meet 3 young community members and hub contributors. As we close our time together, we will share what we are learning. You can ask questions at any time in the chat, and we will leave some time at the end to ask questions as well. I will hand over the mic to Brooklyn. Brooklyn.
Hi there, my name is Brooklyn Arizmendi. I use she, hers pronouns. It looks like, just sorry to break, I can see the interpreter, so everything looks great for ASL on my end. I work at the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and I'm a Program Services Coordinator. Historically, I have worked with LGBTQ+ youth experiencing homelessness, youth involved in systems. And at the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence, I've been lucky enough to work on a grant that focused on LGBTQ+ survivors. So I'll get more into that later, but I want to first just make sure all of the language I am using makes sense and that our vision makes sense. So we're going to do briefly some talk about prevention and primary prevention. Please feel free to use the chat, feel free to ask questions. And also, I am going to be doing the thing where I read off of my slides, because I think that helps for folks who are just like casually listening and things like that. So I don't constantly have the understanding that you might be looking or you might not be, and that's okay. So first, I have this definition. Prevention is a systematic process that promotes safe and healthy environments, behaviors, reducing the likelihood or frequency of an incident, injury, or condition occurring. This is from the Prevention Institute. So this is a definition that kind of led me to gaining a better understanding of what primary prevention is, what any of this means to us. We can go on to the next slide. So there are 3 different types of prevention approaches that we are familiar with. The first one is, of course, awareness, informing people about the problem. That can come in so many different forms, like billboards or letters or promotional materials, those things can create awareness. Risk reduction, seeking to minimize the impact, which may or may not protect the individual, but does not necessarily change the problem. And so risk reduction is something we've had a lot more conversations about recently. You might see it in like needle exchange programs, making sure folks have access to clean needles is a form of risk reduction. So they are less likely to contract anything, but they can still do whatever they're doing. It doesn't necessarily change it, but it makes it safer, which is great for those folks. And then primary prevention, changing things like laws, norms, rules, environments, and conditions. So the problem is overall less likely to happen. So it's kind of getting a little bit more to the root or to this larger scale change that we really like to see when it comes to preventing any sort of thing like violence. You can go on to the next slide. So this is the social ecological model that we use, or one of them. There's many of them. And we try to focus some of our strategies on these rows above interpersonal. So we have individual, interpersonal, organizational, community, and public policy. And so when we ask ourselves, like, where are our strategies impacting, we like to reference this. You can go on to the next slide. So some examples of primary prevention that are trying to hit those organizational, community, and public policy edges are things like advocating or informing the school board about an issue. So I've worked with our youth council really closely, and we've had discussions about like, what does it take to change things at a systems level in a school? And so those might be some of the folks that we might want to talk to. Engaging our legislators, such as writing or going to legislative days, sessions, staying informed, but also advocating. And then talking to city council, something that might help you make local change at a systems level. When we are creating strategies, we want to know, where is the burden lying? And so our concern sometimes when it comes to some of those interpersonal and individual strategies, we worry that the burden is lying on the individuals that we're trying to protect. And so when we're working with young people, if the burden lies on them to make the change, to do something different, to be consistent in that, then is it going to create the impact that we're looking for? And is that fair to them? We want the burden to hopefully lie more on folks who are in power and who could more sustainably make that change. We can go on to the next slide. And so when we're thinking about youth-centered primary prevention, we also have the understanding that we want youth to be those key decision makers, to be leading the charge when they would like to, that young people are experts in their own experiences, to not let adultism get in the way of having them make those decisions with us. And that when they articulate something, that we are continuing to take action. We have been guilty of having a young person talk to legislators and those folks in power being like super excited that a young person feels so passionate and is so knowledgeable, but then they hear that message and they don't do anything with it. And so it is up to us to continue to advocate for them and say like, hey, I know you were really excited when they were saying these things, like, let's follow up on that. Let's continue that conversation. So that young person also doesn't have to do all of the work. And on this slide, you will see that text, but then also a couple of keys, because I like to add those little pieces to slides that, visually appealing. I just got a reminder that I need to make sure I'm describing the slides. So I'm going to keep doing that. And thank you for holding me to that. But we'll also be sending these out at your convenience. So we can go to the next slide. So yeah, on this slide, you'll see the text that I will be describing, but then also you're going to get a sneak peek at some unpublished art that's going to be uploaded to the hub, which is super exciting. I'll talk a little bit more about this project right here. So I work at the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So does Sierra. Sierra works with Indiana Disability Justice. And we came together and we're like, okay, we have this lovely funding source, very thankful for them. How can we work together to do something that encapsulates both of our passions? And as a queer person, as a neurodivergent person, and as a person who's worked with young adults who hold both of those identities, I was like, I'd really love to see more on this population, to work more closely with this population. And Sierra felt the same way. And so when we thought about who we wanted to hear from, we considered that there is a lack of research and listening to these populations, those being youth, LGBTQ plus folks, disabled, and neurodivergent folks. We thought about art as a form of listening because it is accessible. We did not define what art had to be. Art could have been anything, any way that they wanted to convey their answer to our question. And we got that art came in forms of drawings and pictures like this, but it also came in forms of text and other things. And then ultimately, it felt like a really good fit for us. It was a good opportunity. And I'll talk a little bit more about who we worked with first. You can go to the next page. On this slide, you will see a flyer. It is the Seeking Artwork flyer that we created when we first started this project, and we're recruiting artists. And so it will show that our prompt was what makes an environment safe, stable, and nurturing. And then some of the details, payment, and things like that, which we are also happy to share. But so how did we do this? Like, how did this all work? I think it took a lot of accessibility and flexibility, which are both things I often need as well from other folks, so happy to give to others. Wanting to make sure that we were prepared to take it on, that we were really transparent with the artists. A population that made sense to me was actually through a program that I had worked with before. They are a housing program for LGBTQ plus young people who are experiencing housing instability. Having worked with those young people before, I knew that they are often unheard. They often don't get to give their opinion and their voice to folks who can create larger scale change. They're also local to us. And so they aren't going to be the only folks doing this project, but they sounded like great folks to get the perspective of and give that opportunity to. So really excited to work with them. I did so by scheduling with them, going to the house, introducing myself, talking about this project. And then I asked them permission if I could record our conversation on my phone when they finished their artwork. So I'd receive their artwork. We would go through some questions. I'd record it on my phone, not to upload, but rather so I could be present with them and I didn't have to take notes. And then also I can listen to that recording back and I can, as accurately as possible, represent what they were trying to say to me. So it wasn't just those things that kind of stuck out to me or what was in my memory or the notes I wrote, just trying to eliminate some of that, my own personal bias that absolutely comes up when I hear things that excite me. So yeah, that recording was very helpful. Of course, we mentioned the funding source, being able to pay these artists and also provide any requested supplies. So that way they didn't feel like they had to go out of their way to purchase anything. Yeah, it was very important to us and a privilege that we had, and that there are funding sources out there at times that are willing to support this mission and this population. So, and then of course, that flexibility that I spoke of, nothing had to be a certain way. And even if we had a certain vision for the way the project would play out, it didn't mean it couldn't change, because what was more important was hearing from the young people, getting their feedback and making the changes that they needed, and that made sense to them. For example, originally we were going to have all 3 young people live, and there was time constraints, travel constraints. There was a lot of anxiety around talking to folks live on a webinar. And so instead, we made the accommodation to record 2 of them at their comfort level, and then have 1 young person live that was able to make it here at this time. So whatever needed to be done, if it worked for the artist, it worked for us. Nothing had to be a certain way. Just making sure it was continually at their comfort level, accessible to them, and super transparent. We can go on to the next slide. Again, another artwork that is yet to be published, but is super exciting. You'll see it's a person sitting on their bed with some storm clouds over them, and they're thinking about some of those things that many of us have thought about before, which is bills and food, family, school, so many worries for this young person sitting alone in their bedroom. And so I wanted to give a little bit of context before we heard from these young people via recording first. And that is that they're representing their unique lived experiences and perspectives. And so we might not all have the same take on life that they do, and that is okay. They might not have the same take as each other, but they're here to fill in some of the gaps about safe, stable, and nurturing environments and people, and ways that we can create a better world with them. These recordings were edited down for time by me, so they are not perfect. I am not a professional, but I did that. And they are not visual recordings, they're audio recordings with slideshows. And I made sure and was intentional about trying to edit it so there was complete thoughts and I wasn't taking and moving things around or misconstruing what they were saying. Trying to keep it as complete as possible, but understanding we have a limited amount of time today. And if you would like the full recording, that's something we could definitely potentially offer. But yeah. And then the decision to record them instead of having them live was for accessibility. And then the last thing that I almost forgot is that they're going to mention that program most likely that they were in, and maybe some other organizations that have treated them really well. So just putting that out there in case you hear a name of an organization and you're unfamiliar with them. They're speaking on their experiences and some of those systems had been involved. So we will go to the next slide where I'll talk to you about the first young person we're going to hear from. This is Oshani. They use she, they pronouns. They are a lover of cats, long nails, longboarding, and anime. And they created this piece called Madhouse. And on the slide is a picture of them in a nude kind of like crop top with their long nails and their phone. They're taking a selfie in the mirror with some bleached hair that's very short and curly, hoop earrings. And their artwork is a door with some caution tape on it. And it has some of these intrusive thoughts that they have, such as like irrational worries, not giving up, feeling irritable, exhausted, overwhelmed, fearing failure, just worry, isolation, intense, lots of language that they're feeling. And then on the back of the artwork is a little note that says, surround yourself with people willing to learn you, support, and creating your own family is a huge impact on one's mental health. Set and respect boundaries, be willing to grow, leave room for error. My biggest and strongest character traits, resilience, work at your own pace, don't compare yourself to others, and overall allow open communication, have clear expectations, love, and allow to be loved. And so this week I sat down and I had a conversation with Oshani about some of these questions around safety and stability and nurturing, about their artwork. And just like who they want to represent themselves as. So on this next slide, we'll open up the video. It will play. It has captions at the bottom. Um, these folks, we're in a house, we're in an old house, and the talking is a little soft. So you may need to turn up the volume on your computer, just to let you know, or rely a little bit on the captions or ASL interpretation if that's accessible to you. But just to let you know, it could come off a little soft. You might hear things like the click clacking of their nails, and some other noises in the background. So we can go ahead and hit play.
I'm now a high school substitute teacher. I'm engaged. Yeah. I love black cats so much. I wear really long nails and I like bling. Oh, and I dye my hair back and forth from blonde to red.
It looks really good, and the nails are out of this world.
Thanks. And I love the Grinch. Yeah, I do. I really do. Besides Jack Skellington, I think Grinch is probably number one.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. How has creative expression played a role in your well-being and self-discovery?
I've discovered myself by finding my hobbies, style, and not sticking to the norm. I am a non-binary lesbian who longboards, wear long nails, and has their own style. Apparently, I'm supposed to be put in a category due to society standards, but I just consider myself Oshani. Whilst finding myself, I am able to learn how to regulate my emotions and feelings and learn how to communicate. It may look different than others and may not mean verbally, though. Journaling, voice notes, and music is what best helps express myself.
About your piece and why it is meaningful to you. So going back to that, the artwork you submitted.
This piece is my life being an open door, but for me to be cautious before walking through it. I deal with my anxiety and depression every day. It's usually never one without the other. They both fuel each other. I am a welcoming person, maybe a safe space for people, but it can be exhausting. It just never shows on my face. All my life, I've been given these characteristics that don't align with who I am as an individual. It's like I've been put on a billboard and now everyone has unwanted opinions and thought on who I am and who they want me to be. All of the names and words told to me from others are now something that play in my head day by day, whether I believe it or not. So I put it all in my artwork to let people know that words do stick. And sometimes when people tell you things about yourself that you may not have known, if you hear it so many times, you start to believe it.
What makes you feel safe and supported in a space / your community, especially as a young queer neurodivergent person?
As a queer neurodivergent individual, Trinity Haven has given and has been really the only place I've been able to be and discover who I am. I can be dark, quirky, and make and correct my mistakes and still figure out who I am without worrying about people judging me. It feels good to be able to meet other people who are similar to me, not knowing who I was and being able to slowly figure it out is creative, especially when coming from a toxic environment. Sometimes that's all people know. I've started therapy, sub-teaching, also changed my name, and am now engaged, all due to a major inconvenience leading me to be here at Trinity Haven. So it's been a big blessing.
I love that. It sounds like this space is let you be who you really are, let you explore, let you make mistakes.
A lot of things that I wanted to do growing up, I wasn't able to do. So then I got older. I'm still kind of stuck in my teen years because I haven't really been able to experience life. But once I moved in here, I was able to meet new people and experience a world outside and especially build a community as being a queer person, because being like with my family and friends, they were not too accepting, so I kind of had to just play this role as someone who I know I really wasn't, and now I'm able to be my true self. So it feels good.
What are the most important things adults can do to create supportive environments for young queer, disabled, and neurodivergent youth?
Be open to mistakes, go in wanting to learn, and be open to change. Sometimes sticking to what you're familiar with isn't always the best option. Not everyone is going to be like you or have similar outlooks on life as you do. Be an open ear, a companion, and be willing to educate yourself. So many people see neurodivergent, queer, and disabled people as weird, messed up, or what some people may say, not so smart. But we are very smart, determined, and able. So just don't judge a book by its cover.
How can adults balance offering guidance while respecting young people's autonomy and their creative process?
Don't force what just isn't there. Not everyone is capable of receiving guidance or help from others. It takes time. Be willing to give input and be supportive, but not pushy or know-it-all. We know our experience, and we can be the only ones to tell our truth however we see fit. Don't try to change us or use our experiences as a personal gain. Allow us to make our own decisions and be independent. This helps at school, at work, in relationships, and overall to just feel happy and to be happy.
Safety. What do you need to be or feel safe?
I personally need respect, a loving and supportive relationship to feel safe. Basic needs, a healthy living environment, and an LGBTQ friendly community. I used to not care about what spaces I entered until I learned more about my identity, experienced the not so welcoming environments, and met people who aren't supportive of me being a queer person and a neurodivergent individual. I won't and don't feel safe if I am not surrounded by people like me, similar to me, or accepting of people like me. Social and emotional safety is a priority and a deal breaker for me.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. We can go on to the next slide, where we'll be hearing some similar and some different questions from Ben. He uses he, him pronouns. On this slide, you'll see a picture of him. He has short green hair, glasses with the top brown frame and then clear bottoms. Looks like he's wearing a little bit of eyeliner. He's got a black t-shirt on. If you saw more of the picture, you'd see some of that like band t-shirt writing. Ben is a lover of music, but especially music you can hear in the 317 hardcore scene he frequents. On the right of the slide, you will see a picture, you may see a picture of Ben's artwork. It is a drawing of him with green hair, a striped shirt, blue camouflage splotchy pants, and surrounding him are these watercolor-esque blue stars and splotches of paint and sharks. And you'll hear more about the significance of sharks for him. We can go on to the video, same thing. Ben talks a little bit more softly. He has a deeper voice. And so, again, please feel free turning up your computer volume or doing whatever you need to do, relying on the captions or ASL. Thank you for your patience as we move through this.
My name is Ben Valentine. I am 19 years old and I am a cybersecurity student at Full Sail University. I'm taking online classes and I am living in a transitional living program that has helped me become who I am and allowed me the freedom to express myself. And I am transgender and autistic, but I'm also a musician and a comic book writer and lots of other things.
How has creative expression played a role in your well-being and self-discovery?
As a queer person, I think that our own individual creative expression is sometimes all that we have. I identify as agender, which means that I don't really have a set idea of what I need to be or how I should be. I just kind of am.
But it's still playing.
So how I express myself in that sort of like
So sorry, just one second. I'm not sure what happened.
Creative expression, you know, dyeing my hair lots of fun colors.
There we go.
Getting piercings and tattoos.
We could still hear it, so.
Dressing with like really unique thrifted items that nobody else I know has, and just being unique to myself. That's how I sort of get by, I think. So in this piece, I drew me, or at least what I looked like back in the summer when I drew it, and it has all of my favorite colors, and more importantly, it's got lots of sharks. Sharks are a special interest of mine and bring me more happiness than most other things. I drew them all around me to kind of give a visual representation of what goes on in my mind when I'm overwhelmed or overstimulated, or even just when I'm alone. I feel like my brain has a big aquarium in it where I can sit by myself in silence and look at the sharks in the water. But having this piece be part of a continuing conversation and sort of reflecting on myself, it makes me feel like I have a cool mind and a cool thought process.
What makes you feel safe and supported in your space or community, especially as a young, queer, neurodivergent person?
I think that the key to feeling safe and supported is really simple. It's not. I feel like a lot of the times places that are trying to be accommodating just come across as infantilizing and overbearing, overwhelming. Really, the only thing that I need is, a calm space and people who listen and just space to do my own thing, really. I think it's one of those things that people, they have no clue how to even start, providing a safe space for queer people or providing a safe space for people who are neurodivergent or disabled. So they think they have to do all these things, but really it is just like, Trinity Haven where I'm at, it's just a house, and it's just people who are nice, and I have my own room and my own space to do whatever I need to do. And I think that's really all what people need. I think a place where I really did feel that sort of freedom was, I'm still going to it. It is a organization called Easter Seals that helps autistic people with employment and getting jobs, and they sort of hold your hand through all of the steps, and it's very wraparound for all of your needs. And during the interview that I did with my case manager, I felt really safe to not feel forced to make eye contact. I could take breaks whenever I needed to. I was able to, sit how I wanted, and didn't have any fear of how I would be viewed for not masking, my autistic sort of features that I have. And I think that's a great organization because they treat me just how everybody else does, or how everybody else should, and I feel really good when I'm in that space with those people.
The video went away again.
Can I ask, is there anything that they, is there anything visual or anything they say that makes you feel like
There we go.
that? Like, how do they set it up?
I think it's just simple reassurance. Like, if I need to ask a question again to be like, I need a question repeated, or if I need the lights turned down, or if it needs something to do with my hands, they always have, little fidget toys or just different things that I can do to occupy myself so that I can be the most efficient in doing the stuff that I need to do with them. I think that before people want to go about creating that sort of space, they need to have real connections with people who are autistic, with people who do have different disabilities, and with queer people, because a lot of people who are queer are disabled, and vice versa. So you need to like foster strong connections with people in order to know what's best for them. I mean, for example, there are people in my life that they're the only person that I know that has like their disability. For example, I know somebody who has Tourette's, and before I knew that person, like, yeah, I knew what it was, but I didn't understand how to go about it, how to react to certain things, how to, brush certain things off and make the person feel comfortable when they do have, when they exhibit the thing that they have. So,
How does your art help you stay connected to your community and or advocate for social change?
I use my art to advocate for social change by getting connected with my local music scene. We often have fundraisers for Palestine, where like all of the ticket money will go to different organizations. We have a lot of like HIV and AIDS prevention people that come in, and we fund lots of stuff with the income we get from the shows. And so I make flyers sometimes, and I was briefly part of a promotion crew that would like hand out and stick on like telephone poles the flyers, and I also go to art walks where I look at different people's arts, and oftentimes the art walks I go to are queer centered and have a lot of people who are like me. And so whenever I'm feeling down, especially in sort of like a creative block, I like to go to art walks and see what everybody else has done. And if people like me can do that, then that means I can too.
Awesome. So that was Ben. I'm going to introduce Lessa, who is actually in the room with me. Say a couple words first. First on this slide, you will see Lessa uses they, it pronouns. Lessa is a lover of digital art, physical art, and in fact, they sometimes take commissions. I've seen them myself. They're very cool. This picture is a little pink spider on like a wicker circle and table. Lessa really loves spiders, and so when I asked them like, "Hey, do you want a picture of yourself?" they told me to find a very JPEG'd, like dusty spider, essentially, and I couldn't find one, but they really like the color pink, so this was like my next best. And on the right, there is a picture of their artwork. I'm going to read it off, if that's okay. When you hear me, when you hear me, I make a mistake. You raise your hand, and I don't fear it. There is a weight on my head. It isn't stress. It's your hand, patting me like a dog. Everyone loves dogs, and you love me, and you love me. And on this paper, there is little doodles of things like bookshelves and squiggles and stars, a road, a cat, a dog, books, and hearts. It feels very whimsical. And so I'm going to have Lessa come on and we're just going to talk through some of those questions that we asked other folks, some different, some same, and let them give their take. So, switch spots here. Okay. All right, Lessa, you set up?
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna be like in the screen, sort of.
That's fine.
Just in case we have lip readers.
Gotcha.
All right. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Lessa?
Yeah. I describe myself as kind of like just a person who is painfully creative in that I always have to be doing something at least vaguely creative or mind occupying, because it usually keeps me attached to what is real. Um, uh, I'm very usually I'm good at speaking. I also describe myself as a spider. I think it's funny. Like when people ask, I say I'm a non-binary lesbian, and that is both, and my lesbian is both my gender and sexuality in that kind of way. But insofar as that, like, a spider can be a lesbian, because spiders are the coolest guys.
They are the coolest guys. All right. Can you tell us a little bit about your piece and why it's meaningful?
Yeah, I've struggled with having places that felt good to be in for many years. I've been homeless since I turned 18, and I've been bouncing between places where I felt that I had to pretend to be a woman and pretend to not have uh like disabilities, and I had to pretend that like when I walk too much that my back doesn't hurt so bad I want to like fall over, or that I can comprehend what somebody wants without them actually telling me. But this piece is just like, what if all those mistakes that I had demonized in myself, that I said, no, these have to end or I'll never be a good person. What if there was a place that was like, no, actually, those are simply things that can be a part of you, and you don't like, you can try to overcome them, but if needing somebody to explain something better, that isn't bad. Like, um, because it's in this, there's a lot of like, there's the symbolism of like the dog, and like everybody loves dogs, but the things that dogs can do that are inherent to dogs, like tearing stuff apart, if somebody who is autistic or has any other mental illness does that, they will be demonized for it. Whereas a dog, people go, oh, it's just a dog. Like, why isn't there that this is a person with a mental illness, this is a person with a disability, this is a person who's going through something. If they lash out and accidentally destroy something, or destroy something on purpose with that kind of like anger in their heart, why is that worse? Why is that deemed as worse than a dog who gets overexcited and tears apart your pillow? Why is that different? Why do we treat like the inherentness of an animal different than an inherentness of a mentally ill or disabled person? And so this is a lot about that, of like, treat treat me like you would a dog, and be kind to my mistakes.
What do you hope people take away when they experience your art?
I want them to read it and then understand there's a lot of symbolism in the colors and the different things. Because I was rereading it, and all the U in all the words is green. And the U is supposed to represent like the places I've been that have been nurturing. So it's like there's a little house here, there's a bookshelf, there is a road, there are things that make me happy that I did not have before. I did not have a house. I did not have the chance to go on long road trips that didn't make me anxious, because I really like those. Like dog. There was bookshelves and books and knowledge and things I could just access. The me and I and my head and the love, those are pink. That's my favorite color. That's a color that represents me. There's on the top right, there is a little pencil that is drawing. There is a cat, there is a book. These are things I love. These are things that represent part of me. And then dog is blue and hands are blue. It represents like hands and weight are both blue. It's just to represent like the thing that is like wants to be attained, or the thing that is it's like attainable. And red is just the best, like mistakes and fear and stress and rough things. And I hope people understand that kind of symbolism of like there's more than just the words, and the pictures are there to be pretty and also for fun and good.
Thank you. How does art help you stay connected to your community or advocate for change?
I haven't done a lot of advocating for change through my art, but I hope to do more of it in the future. I think art is a thing that can always affect someone, and if they want to like let it in. Sometimes it's hard to, especially for people who are very in their hateful ways, to allow art to touch them. But for people who have even the tiniest gap in their heart, art is the arrow that will go in. It's the arrow that will find it. And I'm hoping to do more art that says like very meaningful things like that, other than just being pretty women, which is most what I do.
The pretty women art is great.
Yeah, I like doing it.
What are the most important things adults can do to create supportive environments for young queer, disabled, and neurodivergent people?
The easiest way, and I think Ben said it already, is to just listen, to just hear. I think Oshani said it too, honestly, is to just understand that you will never do everything perfect the first time around, and be willing to hear what people who you are serving are saying and understand it and actually move forward with it. There's one thing to say you are an ally, and then to be like a member of the community you are serving, or to listen to them actively. Because you can build 1,000 bridges, but if the bridges all lead to the same island, what is that doing?
I think that's very powerful. If the bridges all lead to the same thing, what is it doing? How can adults balance offering guidance while respecting young people's autonomy in their creative process?
Communication. That's the easiest way I can think of, is be extremely open to being told, hey, I think I can do this on my own, or hey, I need help with this. Even if it seems like something simple that everybody should know, there's a lot I just didn't know how to do before I got to a safer location somewhat like within the last 2 years. Like I had only theoretically learned how to run a dishwasher, and they taught me. That seems like something that should come easily, like snap easily, but it was still a thing I had to learn. I had to learn how to fold my sheets. I had to learn a lot of stuff that like I had to learn how to do my taxes. It's stuff that people are good at assuming that everybody knows, that occasionally it just falls through the cracks. Sometimes common knowledge is not common knowledge.
Absolutely.
And being open to advising about that is extremely helpful.
Is there anything else you want to share with folks?
If you see a spider in your house, treat it like you would a queer person. Don't smush it. um there is a lot about things and people and like creatures that we demonize, and it's similar things that we can demonize in human beings. And I think there's a lot that could be learned from seeing things like the spider, and like understanding that it is doing you a service, and it's just in a way that nobody really gets usually. People don't understand that the spider is not there to hurt you, it's there to eat bugs. And people also don't understand that the autistic person isn't looking at you because they don't want to, it's because they can't. That is their purpose. Like the autistic person wants to experience the things that like make them feel safe. They're like a special interest. They want that, and that is the thing that they are good at. That's the thing that makes them feel whole. And a spider feels whole when it makes a little web and it catches bugs. Or if it's a jumping spider, it goes to the bugs. And I think it's important to understand that there's like, that humans are a type of animal and different types of humans are different. Like they're the same animal, but with different specialties. And being cruel to people for being different in any kind of sense is always going to blow up in your face. Because if you have a house that is empty of spiders, you're going to have a house that's full of bugs. If you have a world that's empty of autistic people and neurodivergent people, you're going to have a world that is much less fun.
I love that.
That's my thing.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
No
You're
problem.
welcome to go back to chatting.
So,
We're moving. Thank you so much, Lessa. And of course, if you have any additional questions, we can try to get through those here soon. We're going to talk a little bit more about our process with this project because, well, because we really want more people to do stuff like this and to use art as a form of listening. And so this is really our pitch and explaining some of our process and some of the stuff that we found through this project. So on this slide, you'll see some of the text I'm going to read out about evaluation, our favorite thing. And on the right of it, you're going to see a picture. It is a framework for thinking about evidence. And so I believe this is from the CDC. It's about evidence-based decision-making. And so when we make decisions based on evidence, we're often looking at things like the best available research, experiential evidence, and contextual evidence. And yeah, thank you. See? So this is just a tool that clarifies and defines the standards of best available research evidence. We historically in evaluation have relied on pre and post testing or how many people were in the room when you did your curriculum as evaluation. It's evaluation that usually works for people in grants. That's the information they often want to know. Did my material, was it effective? And did enough people receive that material? But we want to explore evaluation beyond that. Can't necessarily pre and post test art. Well, maybe you can. I don't know. Didn't think that sentence through. But we are not sure this is evidence that will help us generate strategies. So we rely on the best available research when we pick strategies. But something we don't often mention is that experiential evidence in definition is based on the professional insight and expertise of practitioners, but also community residents. Those are the folks that are often left out in when we consider experiential evidence, that our community members also provide that. And that in contextual evidence, it considers whether a strategy is useful, feasible, and accepted by the community. Again, often community is left out. And that's why this strategy of listening in this way was important to us, to capture community in both of these ways, to hear their insight on their experiences and what is accepted by them. So hopefully that made sense. I am not necessarily the evaluation person, but I'm sure C will share more resource on that. So thank you. Essentially, we want to do this a little bit different and consider our community members as our best available research. We can go on to the next slide. So I'm going to talk through some of these preliminary themes, emphasis on preliminary. We are not done with this project yet, but we've gotten some really great work and we evaluated it using just essentially gathering like what language keeps popping up, what experiences keep popping up when they answer this question, what's important to these folks, how did they articulate that? I gathered a lot of that information, not only through doing the art, but then we also gathered it from the interviews I did after they were finished with the art. So some of the themes on this slide, you'll see identity, and we have labeled versus owned identity. And that refers to this experience of people are telling me I'm like this. And oftentimes in these folks' experiences, they're negative things. They're telling me I'm bad, or I'm not cooperative, or yeah, I'm intentionally going against the grain, inconveniencing people, versus owned identity, which this is my identity. This is empowering to me. This is who I am. This is the best version of myself. And so some of those common words were things like experiencing stigma, of owning those identities, whether they be disabilities or queer identities, stereotypes, people assuming things about me. Ben, at a point in the interview, brought up people often assuming that he lacks emotion because he has a monotone voice at times. That's one of his proud autistic traits. And so they stereotype him, but don't realize like there's so much depth to his emotions. Like he feels so much. Um, and his special interest generates a lot of that, like those amazing emotions he has. Um, People making assumptions about you versus things like those owned labels, those owned identities, like our true self, gender expression, accepting our identities over time. Um, it's almost like those are like risk factors versus some of those like protective factors. That identity can hold both of these things, have both of these experiences. Again, hopefully that makes sense. But this is one of the themes that we were noticing. You can go to the next slide. Another one was doors and rooms kept popping up, not only in conversation, but in the artwork. There were a lot of doors you might not necessarily have seen yet, but doors and rooms meant two different things to folks. One was safety. So the safety of having a room at all, the safety of being able to close a door, to have your own space, to feel like you have a wall up against the world, but in a way that feels good to you because you get to choose when you go back in, versus isolation. That at times when I close my door, I feel alone, or I'm protecting myself from people or the world and how they perceive me or treat me. And so some of that common language, again, was doors being opened or closed, basically being open to other people or closed off from other people, being open to people accessing your mind and your heart versus being closed. Of course, like having a lot to do with their mental health in those experiences, having boundaries with folks. Oshani mentions like my doors open because I'm a very open person and very accepting of people, very empathetic. But that there's like a little this caution tape of like I also feel a lot and I'm also going through things like there's a risk to me to having that door open. Of course, anxiety intersecting with that piece of mental health, of worrying about having your door open or too open to folks, not protecting yourself, having your basic needs met, like the door in the room being very literal. Again, all of these folks have the common experience of entering a safe housing program that's affirming to their identities. And so, of course, they thought a lot about basic needs. Like basic needs were very important to them. They're very important to all of us. And having those needs met meant a lot. And then again, risk coming up, the risk of opening your door, the risk of closing your door. So we can go on to the next slide. And then just checking the time. What did safe, stable, and nurturing look like for folks? And I'm going to take a sip of water really quick. We had a question in an email that was asking something to the effect of like, with recent like changes happening in the world and A lot of queer folk or folks with disabilities, neurodivergent folk, kind of being afraid of some of these changes, very reasonably so, if I might say. And how that like impacts being able to offer a safe, stable, and nurturing environment, an affirming environment, an environment that cares about them. It is challenging. But I think some of these things stay the same. So when I was having this conversation with Sierra about some of the common language and the findings and themes, this one first came up, which was dignity of risk. It's not something I'd heard of before, but it makes perfect sense. Folks want to have the ability to make their own choices, to have autonomy, to have agency. It feels so obvious, but I know when folks are in the position of working alongside community, it can be really easy to have power over behaviors, even unintentionally. And I speak from being a previous case manager, that we are in positions of power. As preventionists, we're in positions of power. And we have to be so mindful of not overtaking these folks' agency and making sure that they are constantly these key decision makers. They are constantly the experts in their own experience. They get to have the dignity of risk, the agency to make their choices and to make mistakes, and for those mistakes to be okay. As Lessa was getting to, that when we like show that frustration and we're showing also a level of like wanting to control them, and that's not fair to them. That's not something we get to do. So giving folks and making sure continually that those folks have access to their autonomy and their agency, being friendly and open, and that can look all sorts of ways. I always advocate that looks genuinely different for every single person. Friendly and open for my personality looks different for someone else's personality. And that to just always be genuine, to be yourself, and open that door in a way that makes sense to you. I think folks will understand. Being accommodating, checking in, asking if their needs are met, asking what additionally you can do. Throughout those interviews, throughout all of my interactions with them, I'm always checking in and making sure, is this okay? Would you like me to repeat that question? Letting them know if they want to do something over, they can do something over. If they want something edited out, they can have it edited out. If they feel comfortable even in the physical space that we're in, is their chair okay? Is where they're sitting okay? Do you need to move? Do you need to grab a jacket? Is it cold? Like, I feel like that just truly shows that you care, and that you can be accommodating in many ways. Listening, that came up every single time. That is what the young people were asking for. They want people to just listen to them and hear what they're saying, and not necessarily to give like the million and one excuses you might have for not being able to accommodate in any sort of way, but listening to them, letting them know you understand. I think also just like being upfront about things and transparent. Community, having community around them, as for many of us, is so important, especially when we think about communities like the LGBTQ plus community. We often rely on community. It is tends to be where our safest spaces are. And so getting to be in community and have conversations in community is important. And then, of course, having their basic needs met, something we can all advocate for. Being able to have a room and have food, have a warm place, clothing, all of those things, like all of that, experiencing all of that led them to be able to have a blooming identity. That's what C said, and I thought that was really cool. Just that they being in a safe space, having people that have these qualities and are listening and taking action allowed them to bloom into who they are now, to continue growing and developing as folks, to accept the parts of themselves that other folks have said were bad, to reflect, to feel empowered in their lives, and again, can build trust with people and grow. That was a very common theme for these folks, is having that safe, stable, and nurturing environment, having those safe, stable, and nurturing adults meant that they got to experience these things in a lot of ways, that they felt safe enough to do that. So I think that that's very telling. And then what do you do with all of this information? How do you create sustainable changes? And so this is an opportunity I really wanted to see if folks would be willing to maybe put in the chat or speak up. Based on some of the information you've gotten from young people today, is there anything that sparked something for you? Maybe a change that you could make, or something you learned or thought more about? Is there a strategy that sounds really appealing to you, or feasible, or something to explore? If anyone would like to either come on mic or put in the chat, I'm a chat person. I love it. Answering either of those questions, which I will also put in the chat right now. I'll just give folks some time. And if not, that's okay. Or if anyone said anything, if you heard Lessa say something, or Benner or Shani say something that stuck out to you, I invite it. Yeah, more creative ways to do evaluation with the programming we have. Focus on listening and presence. Thank you. I was moved by the authenticity shared in the artwork. I know, it was so cool. I feel like the luckiest person to get to like sit in the interviews and have these conversations with them. They're really cool people and super fun to have conversations with. It was fun to converse. Thank you. And over time, these pieces will be, the 3 that you saw and heard about directly will be posted to Indiana Disability Justice. But then over time, more and more artwork will be published, and we still have room for more artists, more young artists. And so that'll be really exciting. We'll be able to produce some more less preliminary themes soon. And so, yeah, about 20 young people will be paid for their work, to answer that question of what makes a safe, stable, and nurturing environment. So back to the slide. This was just an example, and I wanted to talk a little bit about a project that had been done before, that I think is another really cool example. These are all just to generate ideas. So on this slide, you'll see the social ecological model again, with the levels of individual, interpersonal, organizational, community, and public policy. An example of a strategy is acting as conduits to decision makers around specifically maybe housing and zoning. So we heard time and time again that, again, it's not that it's like new information, but hearing it directly from them of, we need our basic needs met. We need safe and affirming housing. We need adults that listen to us and folks that work alongside us, folks that are willing to accommodate, that are friendly and open. How do we advocate to have just more of that? And maybe that's more diverse income housing or zoning or programs like the one that they'd been talking about. But one example of this is the sidewalk project that Sierra worked on, where they had folks with varying disabilities walk around the walk, ableist language, apologies. They would go around the city of Bloomington and kind of just see like how accessible or not accessible certain parts were. And they found a lot of parts and lack of sidewalks that were not accessible to them, which creates an unsafe environment, an unsafe city, an unsafe town for them. If they aren't able to go down the street to get groceries, how are they going to get groceries? Like there's this additional barrier. But then we also know that when an environment is more accessible and more people find use of it, there is less violence. If it's better lit, there's less violence. If there's sidewalks, there's less violence. Like that our environments really do impact us and the way folks might act around them. And so they gathered this information, picked out like, this is what needs to be changed. This is like the library isn't accessible to me. How am I supposed to access the library like everyone else? They presented that to their city council and they were able to get the city to make a lot of those changes, including like changing the library layout, adding sidewalks and things to that effect, that physical environment, to create a safer and more accessible place for everyone, which is just super cool. And just an example of something that is very possible, and that you can work alongside folks with disabilities or neurodivergent or young queer people to do. So we can go on to the remaining slides. Yeah, she said the art was integral to that project and the city planners felt responsible. It was very cool. It's interesting the way people, yeah, like respond to like being very directly like, hey, we have the evidence, we have people of this experience. What the heck? Like, how can we change this? And to be able to create that with just a group of people. We're wrapping up in good time. And so I wanted to ask if anyone had any final questions, or again, thoughts are all right. This is a slide with just a couple of question marks. And again, if not, it's okay. How did y'all decide on the questions to ask in the interviews? I'm thinking. We really wanted to focus on essentially like things around, of course, like the prompt itself and some of those details about like what is like safe, stable, and nurturing. How do people act? How does the room look? But then also the power of art and like the way art impacts them, the relationship they have to it. Again, to just gather more information about how to convey to people like that this could be an evaluation tool, that this is important. We're also happy to share those questions. But yeah, lots of collaboration. Yes, and then Jen said the main idea, strategy, is takeaway is to welcome youth with openness, acceptance, and willingness to change based on needs. Yeah, that is the message. That it isn't necessarily over like I mean, Ben said it, it's not that it's like super complicated or very hard to start with. It just takes like the listening and relationship building to folks, understanding what your community needs. And that your community needs could look different than theirs. That is what they're stating that mattered to them. And are you still looking for more young artists? How can we spread the word to connect to youth or to you for this project? So we're focusing this on Indiana. And so soon that will be the challenge is finding more young artists. So absolutely anyone interested, please contact, and would love to find, again, more young artists of with these experiences. So thank you so much. Yeah, give it one more minute. And if you'd like to replicate this in your community, also please feel free to talk to us. Or you want to know more about primary prevention, Indiana Disability Justice, and C, very great technical assistance. So awesome. Love to hear it, Billy. So last bits and pieces. This is just plugging the Indiana Disability Justice and Violence Prevention Resource Hub. It says it is a love letter to the anti-violence movement from neurodivergent and disabled survivors and allies. And so you can find that at indisabilityjustice.org. Here you have a QR code and the logo. You can scan that QR code with your phone to go directly to the website. New published pieces are right on the first page, and there's lots of other really cool stuff. This webinar will also be available on that website. And you can subscribe to the newsletter. You can go on to the next page. And again, this will be sent out to folks too, if we miss anything. So here's some of our contact information. So from right to left, we have Indiana Disability Justice. This is their email. In case you want to chat with me about anything, that is my email. I'm at the Coalition Program Services Coordinator. And then Lessa's plug for their email at lastercourt@gmail.com. Again, they are an artist and a really cool queer, neurodivergent, disabled young person who would love to work with people. So yeah, that's our contact information. And then, yeah, just thank you so much. This last slide is, I'm not sure what that picture is, if I'm gonna be honest. It's like a very mechanical.
Oh, it's like it's the thing I learned how to type on. It's a typewriter. Of course you don't know what that is. They don't even make those anymore.
So sorry.
My bad.
So it's typewriter, that says the end. Thank you. This presentation was funded by the CDC Rape Prevention and Education Grant, distributed by the Indiana Department of Health. The views expressed in written materials or publications do not necessarily reflect the official policies of the Department of Health and Human Services, nor does it mention of trade names, commercial practices, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. Thank you so much, y'all, for attending. Feel free, once this is uploaded, to share it. Share the artwork of these young people. Of course, if you'd like us to help disperse this information, please do. And yeah, we're looking forward to publishing more pieces with these young people and learning more. So thank you again. Thank you for your patience with our technology.